bomb. Yes, it was a bomb. Oh well. So, The Suicide Squad came out last weekend, and a lot of people were expecting pretty solid numbers despite the pandemic. They were like saying 30, maybe 40, hell, maybe $50 million for its opening weekend. And so, opening weekend numbers came in, and it opened with 26 million. That is not good. So, oh well. So, this is my second video about The Suicide Squad today. I'm going to talk about my thoughts about why The Suicide Squad didn't really perform as well as many people thought it should. Obviously, the reviews came out. A lot of people seem to really enjoy this movie. The cinema score is decent enough. It's a B+, I think. So, that's not the issue here. It seems like most people are enjoying this movie. And so I just figured, with all that going into it, like, how could this movie fall below expectations this way? How could it bomb? Well, I have a few ideas as to why a movie like this bombed. And I feel like for a movie to bomb, there is no singular reason why a movie bombs. It has to be like multiple things that cause it to bomb. And I feel like The Suicide Squad is really no exception. This is a video I kind of wanted to do for a while where I talk about an analysis, like why this movie didn't do so well. Why this movie bombed at the box office, why it didn't do so well. And I never had a movie to do that with until now. So let's talk about why I think The Suicide Squad bombed. So let's get the obvious one out of the way. The pandemic. The pandemic is not... We were doing really good. Like, it was slowing down. Like, people were getting vaccinated. Everything seemed fine. And then the Delta variant came in and just made things worse. So, yeah, obviously the pandemic has really affected movie theaters. And definitely The Suicide Squad, it didn't help that movie to open up during a pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, I feel like a lot of movies just didn't perform as well as expected. I think most of them opened with about half of what they would have earned if it wasn't in a pandemic. Because I feel like Black Widow would have done like 150 million in its opening weekend had it not been on Disney Plus, and again, not in a pandemic. And with the actual cases right now, they're skyrocketing pretty much everywhere. I think my county's about to go back to mask wearing pretty soon. I'm vaccinated, come on. Oh well. So I feel like that has not really helped. Like, if you notice, like, the week that everything was starting to shut down, it was the lowest box office ever. So, with all this concern over this highly contagious strain, seriously, just go get vaccinated. It's really, just don't listen to any conspiracy theorists. Just go get vaccinated. So with the new cases, some people are kind of like worrisome about like going back to the theater. So I definitely understand that. And personally, even though I'm still like wearing a mask everywhere, I'm still kind of uncomfortable going places still, despite that, because we heard of like breakthrough cases. And I feel like the Suicide Squad was just a victim of bad timing because of all these new cases that are coming out in this new surge, and we don't know when it's going to end, unfortunately. The second is the lack of star power. Now, obviously, this movie has Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, John Cena, but most of these people, unfortunately, are not box office draws. They're just not. Idris Elba, never been a box office draw. John Cena, not really, especially in a lead role. He wasn't playing with fire. Don't remind me of that. But he hasn't really been in a big movie where he's a lead character. And Margot Robbie, occasionally she has the big hits like Wolf of Wall Street or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But again, she was more of a supporting character in that. This is a lead character that she's playing. Meanwhile, pretty much everyone else in this movie is just unknowns for the most part, with the exception of, say, Sylvester Stallone, who does a voiceover role, or Viola Davis. I think a lot of people know who Viola Davis is. But random people, I don't think a lot of people know who, really pay attention to, most of these people, like Joel Kinnaman or Michael Rooker, Nathan Fillion, or, any of these people. I just feel like there was not really a big star behind it. Which brings me to my third reason. There was no Will Smith in this movie. Now, there were rumors that Will Smith was going to appear in this movie. He was approached by James Gunn, I think. And he didn't want to do it for reasons, I guess. I guess he was filming another movie, who knows. But that kind of continues a trend with Will Smith movies. They make a sequel to it without Will Smith. Remember Independence Day 2. Remember Men in Black International. None of them did well. But this movie actually was better than the first one, so unfortunately Deadshot's not in this one. So you can just take the money out because this movie clearly didn't do as well as the first Suicide Squad did. So there was no Will Smith in it. There was no big name stars behind it. Well casted, everyone was great in that movie, but there was just no big name to like really draw people into this movie. Also, no recognizable comic book characters even. At least some people know who Harley Quinn is. At least some people know who Joker was. That's why, people were interested in the Suicide Squad. The first one, at least. This one, I don't think I've heard of most of these characters. Like, who's heard of Peacemaker before this? Who's heard of Polka Dot Man? Ratcatcher 2? King Shark? Who's heard of these people? I don't think even... comic book fans probably have heard of these characters, but most people just have no idea who these characters are. So it's just... I get it that James Gunn wanted to go for, the not-so-big names, the ones that weren't as well-known. But maybe you should have thrown in someone other than Harley Quinn for people to recognize. Don't throw in Jared Leto, just throw in someone else, but maybe you should have done that. Also, let's move on. I think, this is reason number 5. James Gunn. Now, James Gunn, obviously, a lot of people have thoughts on him. Personally, I'm not a big fan of him as a director, other than, say, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and this. I didn't care for Slither, I didn't care for Super, I didn't care for that Brightburn movie that he produced. And a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, it's that guy who just got rehired by Disney despite making all these really disgusting jokes. I'm not going to pay to see his next movie. So maybe there's that behind the whole thing. I don't know. And like a lot of the ads were like from the twisted, beautiful mind of James Gunn. I feel like most people won't know who James Gunn is unless they've been following that news story about his tweets and his firing. I feel like most people just don't care. So it's like, I don't think like he really sold that movie. Like, remember during Brightburn, it was like from executive producer James Gunn. And most people just didn't see that movie. You shouldn't see that movie. That movie was terrible. But people didn't see it for James Gunn. No one saw that movie. And I don't think people are going to go clamoring to see this movie because, oh, it's a James Gunn movie. He doesn't have that name recognition yet. Someone like Quentin Tarantino does, or Steven Spielberg does. Not James Gunn. I don't know why. Reason number 6, HBO Max. Now, there are reports out there that says the Suicide Squad is like 25% behind Mortal Kombat in its first weekend on HBO Max. And I don't know. I really just don't know. I feel like that also hurt it. I feel like it kind of hurt it, but at the same time, it didn't. Because if you look at a lot of the box office numbers for a lot of these movies that are in theaters and on HBO Max right now, like, say, Mortal Kombat, Conjuring 3, Space Jam even, or Godzilla, they're all kind of opening around the same range. So I feel like, I don't know, I agree that a lot of these movies would have opened bigger if we weren't in a pandemic and they weren't on HBO Max. But I don't know. I really just don't know. I feel like a lot of people, if they're uncomfortable with seeing it in a theater, they'll just watch it on HBO Max. But a lot of people don't have HBO Max. It's expensive. I would recommend getting it, though. It's actually a really good service. So a lot of people said, a lot of people watched In the Heights on HBO Max. Well, that was also a bomb. So, I don't know. Anyway. I think this is reason number 7, but there was lack of interest in the new Suicide Squad movie. People clearly didn't like the first movie. I wasn't a big fan of it, so I feel like people were kind of confused as to what this was. Was it a sequel? Was it a reboot? Was it a remake? A spin-off? Reimagining? And the answer to that question is yes, it was all those movies, basically. So a lot of people they just redid this movie with a bunch of characters who no one knows, and they just title it the same thing as the last movie. They just put "the" in the title. And yeah, I feel like people just saw that and they're like, oh, I'm not doing that again. That movie was terrible, so I'm not doing it again. So why should I bother? I hated that first movie, so I'm not going to go see this one. Oh well. I think this is number 8 now. The R rating might have hurt it. Now I know that some movies that are rated R do really well these days, like comic book R-rated movies, like say Deadpool, Deadpool 2, Joker, for instance. I feel like those were with more recognizable names and more well-casted characters than anything else. Like, A lot of people loved Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. A lot of people loved Joaquin Phoenix as Joker. So those are perfectly cast. These, again, I feel like, again, pandemic is probably the main reason why these movies are failing, but still. I just feel like the R rating might have hurt it a bit, although I think I saw a couple kids in my screening for this movie, which I wouldn't have taken kids to this movie, but oh well. Going from a PG-13 to R might not have helped it, financially. Oh well. There are some really, there are some movies that were R-rated that have done really well in the past, and this just was not one of them, unfortunately. And the last reason I'm going to throw out there is because, I might as well, the movie had an $185 million budget. For a movie with this cast, I think that's way too much. I would have capped it, I would have said $100 million. Maybe 150 if I was feeling really confident in the movie. But $185 million, not including marketing, that's not... Unless it's like... I feel like they knew that it was going to be a big hit, and then all this pandemic stuff happened. So, I don't blame them necessarily. But you gotta know when to spend that much money for a movie. Like, seriously. I feel like if it was $100 million, the damage wouldn't have been so bad. But $185 million for an R-rated movie doesn't matter if it's part of the DCEU. It just doesn't make sense. So, there were a lot of reasons why I think this movie bombed. Pandemic, lack of star power, no Will Smith, no recognizable characters, James Gunn, HBO Max, lack of interest in new Suicide Squad, R rating, massive budget. Again, I feel like there's not a singular reason why a movie bombs. I feel like it's like a bunch of reasons, and we're just trying to figure it out, like, what was the main culprit. Obviously, with the pandemic, we can obviously figure out what the main culprit was, but it's sad, it's disappointing, but oh well. But, all I can say is go watch Suicide Squad. Watch it on HBO Max if you want to. Go see it in the theater if you want to. Just see this movie. It's really good. So, those are my thoughts as to why I think the Suicide Squad bombed. What did you think? Why do you think it bombed? I think it's an obvious reason why. But what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.